Before we dive into this story, I need to warn you this isn't just a tale of late-night parties and celebrity extravagance. What you're about to hear is my disturbing, bone-chilling account, one that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about fame, power, and the price some are willing to pay to stay at the top. This story isn't just some urban legend, whispered about in the dark corners of the internet. No, this has been corroborated by none other than Diddy himself. It's not for the faint of heart. The events I'm about to describe are unsettling, disturbing, and yes, terrifying. If you're not ready to face the sinister underbelly of glitz and glamour, turn back now. But if you dare, stay with me as I recount an experience so surreal and so horrifying that it has haunted me to this very day. So sit back, brace yourself, and prepare to dive into a night like no other. This is the story of the time I went to Diddy's one and only red party. It was 4 a.m., and the Parisian nightclub throbbed with energy. The music was deafening, a pounding bass line that rattled the walls and reverberated deep in my chest. The air was thick, partly with the haze of cigarette smoke, and partly with the mingling sense of sweat, perfume, and spilled liquor. The crowd, an amorphous wave of bodies, writhed on the dance floor in a way that was less dancing and more primal. From my vantage point in the VIP section, it all seemed surreal. This wasn't just a party. It was an exhibition of excess. Women draped in glittering dresses, or in some cases, not much at all, laughed, and posed for pictures with champagne. Bottles nearly as tall as they were. Men in tailored suits lounged on leather couches, their expressions a mix of boredom and superiority, as if they were above the spectacle unfolding around them. I took another sip of the champagne that had been delivered to my table. It was crisp, bubbling lightly on my tongue, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the excessive price tag attached to bottles like these, or maybe it was the feeling that all this opulence was just a mask for something much darker. This is what a Diddy party looks like, I muttered under my breath, shaking my head slightly. I'd come to Paris for a story, not to lose myself in this madness. But that's the thing about being around someone. Like Sean Diddy Combs, he has a way of pulling you into his world, a world where the rules of ordinary people don't seem to apply. Diddy himself sat across the room, positioned at the center of a semicircle of couches like a king holding court. His girlfriend, Kim Porter, was by his side, radiating calm amidst the chaos. Every so often, he would lean over to whisper something to her, and she would laugh, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Even from a distance, his aura was magnetic. This was a man who commanded attention effortlessly, his presence undeniable, filling the room like a storm cloud. As I watched him, I couldn't help but feel that I was witnessing something more than just another celebrity party. There was an edge to this night, a tension I couldn't quite put into words. "This one's from Diddy." The voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see a young man, one of Diddy's entourage, placing yet another bottle of champagne on my table. "He says he wants you to enjoy yourself." I raised my glass in thanks, but the gesture felt hollow. I wanted to enjoy myself, truly. I did, but the more I drank, the more I felt like an outsider, like I didn't belong here. That feeling only grew stronger as the night went on. The unease had started hours earlier, during my interview with Diddy. His dressing room at the Bercy Stadium was unlike anything I'd ever seen, less a place to prepare for a performance and more a temple built in his own image. The walls were adorned with enormous portraits of his face, lit by the warm, flickering glow of dozens of candles. The scent of sandalwood hung heavy in the air, almost overpowering. Diddy sat across from me, reclining in a leather chair with an ease that spoke of someone completely in control of his environment. He was dressed immaculately, a black suit tailored to perfection. In his hand, he swirled a glass of cognac, the liquid catching the candlelight with every movement. "Paris," he began, his voice smooth and measured, "is where people come to lose themselves. There's something in the air here, something magical." I nodded, scribbling notes in my journal as he spoke about his love for the city, how it had become a second home for him and Kim. "We've spent so many nights just walking along the Seine," he said, "talking and drinking champagne. It's different here. People, they open up in ways they wouldn't anywhere else." But as the conversation continued, his tone began to shift. The charisma was still there, but beneath it was an undercurrent of something darker. "You ever wonder what it takes to stay at the top?" he asked, his gaze locking onto mine. The question caught me off guard. Before I could answer, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's not just about talent. It's about control over your image, over your work, and over others." He paused, swirling the cognac thoughtfully, And sometimes, he added, you have to give something up to get there. A chill ran down my spine. I couldn't quite explain why, but the way he said it, so casually, so matter of fact, like he was describing a simple business transaction, made it deeply unsettling. Before I could press him further, one of his entourage members entered the room, pulling his attention away. The moment passed, but the weight of his words stayed with me, lingering like the smell of sandalwood long after I'd left. Now, as the party roared on around us, I found myself standing beside Kim Porter. She seemed calm, almost detached, as though the chaos surrounding us was nothing more than background noise. She held a champagne flute delicately in her hand, and across the room, Noda moved through the crowd with that same ethereal, commanding presence, guiding guests, whispering directions, her gaze catching mine for a brief, unsettling moment, sipping slowly while the rest of the room dissolved into an unrestrained frenzy. You don't seem fazed by any of this, I said, gesturing toward the gyrating bodies on the dance floor and the wild, unfiltered debauchery unfolding in every corner. She turned her gaze to me, her dark eyes sharp and unflinching. Why would I be? She asked, her voice steady, almost amused. I don't know, I admitted, struggling to find the right words. It's just a lot to take in. Kim smiled faintly, the corners of her lips lifting in a way that was neither friendly nor cold. Just knowing. This is nothing, she said, tilting her head slightly, as if listening to music only she could hear. You should see what happens when the cameras aren't around. Her words sent a ripple of unease through me, but my curiosity won out over caution. How do you deal with it? I asked. With him. Kim's serene mask faltered, and for a brief moment her expression darkened. She looked away, her gaze distant, as though recalling something she'd rather forget. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, laced with resignation. Living this life with Diddy is the most amazing, horrible feeling you will ever experience. I furrowed my brow, unsure of what she meant. She continued, the highs are unimaginable. Our first night in Paris, we were at the top of the Eiffel Tower, drinking champagne, probably the most romantic moment of my life. Her voice grew quieter, her expression shifting again, this time to something heavier. Then we went back to his suite for a 30-hour tantric sex session. 30 hours? I repeated. I checked out in the first 10 minutes. I blinked, unsure whether to laugh or wince. Before I could decide, Kim leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Can I tell you something off the record? I nodded, the tension in my chest tightening as I braced myself. Kim glanced around, making sure no one else could hear, then locked her eyes onto mine. Her voice trembled, barely audible over the pounding music. Diddy is a demon. I stared at her, frozen in disbelief. My first instinct was to laugh, to dismiss it as hyperbole, but the seriousness in her tone made that impossible. She didn't break eye contact. Her words landed like a weight in the pit of my stomach. You're joking, I managed, though my voice lacked conviction. Kim's lips pressed into a thin line as she slowly shook her head. You'll see for yourself, she murmured, almost to herself. Then, without another word, she turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing alone, her confession echoing in my ears. The grand ballroom was the heart of it all. It was a cavernous space, its high ceilings disappearing into shadow. The flickering glow of hundreds of candles barely illuminated its edges. The faint scent of wax and something metallic hung in the air, mingling with the low hum of whispered conversations. The light cast strange, dancing patterns across the room, and the air itself felt heavy, as though it were saturated with something unseen, but unmistakably present. Across the room, Noda moved with the same otherworldly command, weaving between guests, whispering instructions, her presence both magnetic and unsettling. Every step she took seemed to bend the room around her, as if reality itself deferred to her will. Oppressive. At the center of the room stood a group of young women in their early 20s. They were dressed in nothing but tank tops and underwear, their pale skin illuminated by candlelight. Their lips were painted a garish red, the color so vibrant it almost seemed to glow in the dim room. They stood perfectly still, their expressions blank and unseeing, as though they weren't fully present in their own bodies. I couldn't shake the unease that rippled through me. Their stillness was unnatural, not the kind born of fear or nerves, but something deeper, more sinister. It was as if they were marionettes, held in place by invisible strings, waiting for a puppeteer to give them purpose. What the hell is this? I whispered to myself. The words barely escaped my lips, swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. No one answered. Around me, guests continued to murmur and sip champagne. as if nothing about the scene unfolding at the center of the room was out of the ordinary. Before I could fully process what I was seeing, Diddy entered the room. His presence was magnetic, commanding attention as effortlessly as if he had snapped his fingers. He moved with deliberate grace, his tailored suit pristine, his gaze sharp and predatory. It was like watching a lion step into a den of smaller, weaker creatures. His confidence was so absolute it bordered on arrogance. "Welcome to the Red Party," he announced. His voice was low and resonant, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. The room erupted into cheers, the sound incongruously jubilant against the eerie tableau before us. But something about Diddy's tone sent a chill down my spine. The way he said it didn't sound like a theme for the night. It sounded like a declaration of intent. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the young women. Their eerie stillness anchored my gaze, even as every instinct screamed at me to look anywhere else. I'd heard whispers earlier in the night, fragments of conversations about how Diddy liked his parties to be perfect. His obsession with detail wasn't limited to the music, the decor, or the champagne. It extended to the people, to the energy they brought, and to the roles they played. An older man standing near me, dressed in a crisp suit, leaned in as if he sensed my confusion. "Diddy likes his parties a certain way," he whispered, his tone both amused and conspiratorial. "It's not just indulgence, it's intention." I frowned, but before I could ask what he meant, he gestured subtly toward the young women at the center of the room. "The red lipstick," he continued, his voice hushed but tinged with awe. "It's symbolic. Red is the color of passion, of power, of blood." My stomach tightened. "It's what draws the spirit here," he said, lowering his voice even further. "What opens the door?" I felt a twist of nausea, but he wasn't finished. "The tank tops and underwear," he added, making a small gesture with his hand. "They strip them of identity, make them blank slates, pure vessels, ready to receive whatever comes through." His words left me cold, and suddenly the pieces began to fall into place. Across the room, Noda moved with the same haunting, commanding presence. She passed near the young women, her gaze sweeping over them like a shadow, confirming that the ritual, the energy, and the power in the room were all under her careful orchestration. The young women weren't just decorations or performers. They were participants in something far darker. The garish lipstick, the minimalist attire, the vacant expressions, every detail served a purpose, intertwining them with the ritual this night was building toward. Diddy turned his attention back to the crowd, his smile predatory. "The Red Party is more than a name," he said, his tone growing darker. "It's a calling, a celebration of power in its purest form. And tonight, you'll witness the pinnacle of it all." The candles flickered, their flames surging higher for a brief moment before settling back into a steady glow. The air grew heavier, thicker, as though the room itself were alive, breathing. The young women at the center remained still, but their stillness now felt charged, as if they were conduits for the energy building around them. My chest tightened. My breathing grew shallow as I fought the urge to run. Something was coming, something I couldn't explain but could feel with every fiber of my being. The Red Party wasn't just a spectacle, it was a ritual, and whatever it was meant to summon was drawing closer with every passing second. The night unraveled faster than I could process. The room was saturated with an energy I couldn't describe. Oppressive, suffocating like the walls themselves were closing in. Flickering candlelight cast shifting shadows across the ballroom, making the space feel alive, as if it had a pulse of its own. The chanting from the guests grew louder, their voices blending into a hypnotic hum that made my head swim. At the center of the room, Diddy stood with his arms raised high, commanding attention like a preacher leading a congregation. His expression was calm, but his eyes glinted with something dark, something inhuman. Then the music changed. It wasn't the pulsing rhythmic bass line from earlier. This was something else entirely. A haunting, distorted melody filled the room, eerie and warped, like it was rising from deep underwater. At first, I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Then I saw them. The young women, the ones who had stood motionless just moments before, were swaying now. Their bodies moved in perfect unison, their voices blending into an otherworldly harmony. It wasn't singing. It was something darker, something primal. Across the room, Noda moved with the same commanding, almost supernatural presence, guiding the rhythm of the ritual, her gaze sweeping over the young women, ensuring every movement aligned with the dark energy in the room. Diddy stepped into the center of the circle, and that's when it happened. His body began to move, not with the smooth, controlled gestures of a man who had spent decades in the spotlight, but in a way that was completely unnatural. His limbs jerked and twisted violently, as though he were a puppet controlled by invisible strings. His head snapped back, and a guttural sound tore from his throat, a sound that wasn't human. Around the circle, the guests erupted into nervous laughter, clapping and cheering. But their expressions betrayed them. They weren't enjoying this. They were participating because they had no choice. I stood frozen, my champagne glass trembling in my hand. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the scene unfolding in front of me. Diddy's movements grew more frantic. His body contorted in ways that shouldn't have been possible. It was as if he were being consumed from the inside out, his frame jerking violently, like something within him was trying to escape or take over. Then I saw it. Above him, just barely visible in the flickering light, a pair of glowing eyes appeared. They were suspended in the darkness, hovering over Diddy like a predator watching its prey. Inhuman. Large. Almond-shaped. Burning with a fiery intensity that made my chest tighten. They blinked once, slowly, and I swear I saw a twisted grin materialize beneath them, sharp and jagged like broken glass. My stomach churned. This wasn't some elaborate performance. This was something else. Something I didn't have the language to describe. I blinked hard, hoping to break the spell. But when I opened my eyes, the scene had only intensified. Diddy's movements were no longer just erratic. They were violent. His body slammed into the floor, then sprang back up with an impossible force. Around him, the guests continued to clap and cheer, their laughter growing louder, more forced, as if trying to drown out the sound of their own fear. Then he screamed. The sound was deafening, primal, a raw outpouring of agony and rage that sliced through the room like a blade. It wasn't a scream that belonged to any human, deep and guttural, layered with tones that should not have existed. The glowing eyes above him widened, and for a moment, I thought I saw them flicker, an acknowledgement, as if they were aware of me, watching me. And then Diddy ran. He bolted from the circle, slamming into guests as he tore through the room, his scream echoing long after he disappeared from view. The crowd parted like waves. Nervous laughter collapsed into hushed murmurs as people glanced at one another, unsure of what to do next. No one followed him. They simply stood there, paralyzed, as if waiting for permission to breathe again. The path away from the chateau was a blur of jagged breaths and trembling steps. My legs barely held me as I stumbled through the wooded estate, each shadow stretching longer and darker than it should have. The world felt wrong, unnatural, like reality itself had been warped by whatever I had just witnessed. My mind raced, replaying the glowing eyes, the violent convulsions, the inhuman scream. Was it real? Could any of it have been real? I didn't have an answer. I wasn't even sure I wanted one. When I broke through the tree line and reached the gravel driveway, my strength gave out. I collapsed to my knees, my hands scraping against the coarse stone. My lungs burned as I dragged in air that felt too thin, too cold. I didn't notice the figure until it was almost upon me. "Hey!" a voice called out, low and steady. I looked up sharply, my pulse spiking, as a towering man stepped out of the darkness, and behind him, almost imperceptibly, Noda's shadow moved silently along the edge of the trees, her presence chilling and commanding even in the dim moonlight. Shadows swallowed him as his broad shoulders blocked the fading sunlight. His face was lined with deep grooves as if carved by years of regret. His eyes, however, were soft, almost pitying. Instinctively, I scrambled backward, my mind flashing to the circle, the chanting, and the terror I'd left behind. "Stay back!" I shouted, though my voice lacked conviction. The man raised his hand slowly in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said calmly. His tone weighted with something I couldn't quite place. "But you need to listen." I froze, my chest heaving as adrenaline warred with exhaustion. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The man sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "I've worked for him, for Diddy, for years, long enough to know what just happened in there." He gestured vaguely toward the chateau, his expression darkening. I stared at him, my body still coiled with tension. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. "You've been marked," he said grimly. My stomach dropped. "Marked?" I echoed, the word tasting foreign and wrong on my tongue. "What does that even mean?" "It means you've seen too much," he replied. "Once you've been exposed to the Jezebel spirit, there's no undoing it. It's like a parasite. It latches onto fear, regret, weakness. It crawls into your life, your mind, your soul, and it doesn't let go." The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. Why would it come after me? I didn't do anything. I didn't ask to be part of this. His jaw tightened, and for a moment he seemed to wrestle with himself. You don't have to do anything, he said finally. Just being there, seeing it, that's enough for it to latch on. Anger bubbled up beneath the fear. I shook my head again. Then why the hell are you still working for him? I demanded. If you know what he is, what that thing is, why stay? His expression hardened, his voice dropping. Sometimes survival means making deals, he said, each word heavy with regret. I've done what I had to do. And trust me, this thing takes more than it gives. My mind spun. How do I stop it? How do I make it go away? You don't, he said bluntly. You can't, but you can fight it. He leaned closer. The spirit feeds on fear. The more you give into it, the stronger it gets. Don't trust what you see. Don't trust what you feel. It'll twist your thoughts, make you doubt yourself, isolate you until there's nothing left. His words were terrifying, but there was something in his tone, an urgency, a quiet desperation that made me believe him. He leaned in one last time, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Stay strong. Don't give in. And remember, you're not the first and you won't be the last. He straightened and turned away, his boots crunching against the gravel. Wait, I called after him, my voice hoarse. Your name. What's your name? He paused, glancing back over his shoulder. His lips curled into a faint, knowing smirk. Noda, he said simply. Then he disappeared into the shadows. I stood there alone in the quiet afternoon, his final words echoing in my mind. Once marked, there's no true escape. The truth is, this isn't just a story. It's a warning. What I witnessed that night wasn't an isolated event, or a party that went too far. It was a glimpse inside a machine, a system built on control, manipulation and submission, operating at the very core of the industries we idolize. This was never about fame. It was never about fortune. It was about power. Power bought at the cost of humanity, engineered and enforced by forces far darker than most people are willing to admit. I'm sharing this because the darkness I saw isn't confined to that chateau. It's spreading. It's seeping into everything it touches. Our music, our movies, our culture. The truth is hidden in plain sight, yet too many choose not to see it. And if we don't act, these lies won't just survive. They'll fester, they'll normalize, and eventually, we'll start to believe them. Worse, we'll become them. I can't do this alone. I need you. Yes, you watching this. If any part of this resonates with you, if it stirs even a flicker of recognition or doubt, then share this video. Like it, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, anyone who will listen. Because the more people who see this, the harder it becomes to bury the truth. And to Diddy, or anyone else trapped inside this system, if you're listening, know this. It's not too late. There is a way out. But the first step is calling the lies what they are. Calling the contracts what they are. A prison disguised as power. This isn't just about me. It's about all of us. If we stay silent, we're complicit. If we look away, we give the darkness permission to grow. Don't let the lies win. Don't let them shape you into what they want you to be. The choice is yours. The truth is out there. What are you going to do with it?